time to put down your rod and pick up your headphones. Join JC and Andy from Ebb Tide Tackle for The Outflow, the podcast talking all things lure fishing with hardcore fishers from all over the world.
Welcome to our Murray Cod special on Lake Eildon and cod in general. We've got a specialist panel today. Steve Vidler, Thomas Pinter, Fishing with the Captain, and Kish, Christian Georgopoulos. All these guys are absolute legendary gun cod fishermen. We go into cod, their behaviour, activity, and also a big focus on how we all approach Lake Eildon. Enjoy.
Thanks, ladies and gents. Awesome turnout. We're absolutely pumped as Ebb Tide Tackle to have this number of people to want to turn out and hear what we've got to say about Murray Cod. It's actually, can't tell you how happy we are with that. So thank you to you. Thanks to Vic Game for giving us a platform to be able to do this talk. The aims of our workshop tonight, impart the knowledge of the people on their stage, and there is a decent amount of knowledge up here. There's people that do a lot of thinking about their fishing. Not always right, definitely not, but always working on theories and strategies and trying to nut these fish out. There's not a day any of us go out in the water without trying to truly analyse why we did or didn't catch. And I truly think we probably learn more on the days when we don't catch. And in the case of Lake Eildon, that gives a lot of learning, doesn't it? Share our theories, hopefully maybe give some confidence to yourself of some of the things that you're thinking and some of the things that you're doing already. And we're trying to aim it to everyone, from the new cod angler through to the experienced angler that maybe knows a lot, maybe knows more than us. We don't pretend to know it all. That maybe there's a few things that we do that you might be able to pick up on as well. So as you see, we've got a panel format. We'll say different things. We'll have different views on subjects and we might even be polar opposites on some bits. And that's okay because no one's got a complete insight into the minds of these fish, have they? Questions, when they come up, don't be shy. I guess maybe give us a moment that we're about to cover that, but before we move on from something, don't be afraid to whack your hand up and get some questions going. Andy, have I missed anything?
No, I think that's about it.
Okay.
You've done well.
Thank you. Good start. The panel. So I'll introduce myself first. I grew up in Shepparton in country Victoria in a fishing and shooting family. We targeted Murray cod fairly relentlessly, both in the Goulburn and the Murray. It was all bait. I loved lure fishing. I used to love flicking lures for the reddies, and we used to do a bit of trout fishing as well back then, but cod was all about bait, and probably typical of the generation back then and the family that I grew up in and the bushmen that they were at the time. I reckon 95% of the fish that we caught were on set lines. That was the era back then, and we're in a much better time past that, and the fisheries are in much better state now than they were then. They were really actually quite horrible back then, and that's thanks to a lot of good factors. So my story with Murray cod's kind of in two parts. It's that time in my youth up until probably my mid-20s when women became a major factor in my life and other distractions. But then I really, really got hard back into fishing again about 15 years ago and have fallen in love hardcore with cod again, probably about 6 or 7 years ago. Casting for cod is, I guess, my little local obsession. I love doing it. I have a love-hate relationship with Eildon. Right now I love it. 2 years ago it was a different story. But that's me. Starting down the other end, let's hear from you, Kish.
My name's Kish. That's just my nickname. It's not my actual birth certificate name. A lot of people try and take the piss and call me Kish. It's Kish. Don't ask me where I got it from. My old man just called me it from a young age. So I'm similar to John. I grew up in Shepparton, still live in Shepparton. I spent a lot of my time bait fishing as a kid, and then from there got bored of that, so started lure fishing. Predominantly spent a lot of my time fishing the Murray River. Successfully got a lot of good results, which was good. And then from there I sort of focused a lot of my attention towards fishing Lake Eildon, which has paid off quite well. But yeah, definitely a lot of time put in there as well.
Down the line.
Steve Vidler. Born and bred at Euroa. I've been, as well as a keen angler, I've been breeding and growing fish professionally for about 35 years. The last 10 years I've spent running the native fish program for Victorian Fisheries Authority out of Snobs Creek at Eildon, and the last 2 years I was program manager there. So I've just had a bit of a change in the last 6 months where I've left. I actually live on the Gold Coast, but I come back in the summer now and still in charge of the breeding program and stocking for all the native fish in Victoria. Our predominant species that we do at Snobs Creek in the natives is the Murray cod, but we also do trout, cod, macquarie perch, and if time and space permits, we do some golden perch. The stocking program, when I started 10 years ago with fisheries, we were stocking about 2 million fish a year. Last year was the target was 5 million. We actually stocked 7 million, and the target for within 3 years is 10 million fish a year. So I won't waffle on too much about it, but we buy a lot of fish in, but we breed a lot. When I started at Snobs, we were producing about between 60 and 100,000 Murray cod a year out of the hatchery there. Last 5 years, the minimum's 500,000 we've done, and last year we did 850,000 out of there. So again, home base, my home fishing base is Eildon. Again, same as everyone else, I have a love-hate relationship with it too, but it takes me about 5 minutes to get there from work, so it's pretty handy. I can fish it a lot more. So there's a few secrets to it and there's a few myths to it, but we'll talk about that as we go along.
Hi, my name's Andy Smith. A little bit of background on me. I've basically been fishing obsessed forever, to the point where I grew up southwest Victoria. Didn't matter what it was, trout, bream, whatever, trips away chasing cod. We're always doing it. Family holidays were geared around where Dad and I wanted to go fishing, often Narooma or Cairns or anywhere else. I basically went through high school, went on with my obsession, did fisheries management, aquaculture at uni, worked in aquaculture and fish breeding and fisheries for a few years, branched off and been in the fishing industry basically since then. So it's the last 20 years. Obsessed with anything that's lure fishing, lure casting. Used to do a lot of bait fishing. I don't think I've bait fished now for probably 8 or 10 years. Nothing wrong with that. It just doesn't scratch my itch. Love Eildon. Hate it. Love it. Hate it.
I think you hate it more than
Yeah, I swore it's probably about 18 months ago, I'm never coming back here.
I remember that day well.
I remember that as well, on the houseboat.
Everyone always does. Now, I can't wait to get there to the point where I don't know why we drive past the place. I love it. Yeah, we'll go into a few details on that later. Also fish my whaler a lot. Probably haven't done a lot in the rivers, in the Murray. That's just the next thing to tick off the list, hopefully. Got a good teacher down the end here that I'm going to hit up for some lessons. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well, g'day guys, I'm Thomas Pinter. Yeah, just start off a bit of a background. I've got a European heritage. My parents both came over to Australia. The mindset and everything that I've got is pretty much, and if it's not for the bit of a stubborn attitude from my dad, chasing big fish with big lures and just pushing to get a result, not refusing to come home or be defeated. But that sort of carried coming over to Australia. Background since coming to Australia about chasing marlin and everything, but Murray cod really do hit the sweet spot. I've even just recently got married on the banks of the Murray River because I just can't get away from the place. I just have to be orientated about the Murray or something to do with the Murray cod itself. So nonetheless, it's a bit of me.
They're the two extremes of Thomas, marlin and Murray cod. So you got a fairly passionate and experienced panel. Let's get stuck into it and have a bit of an in-depth breakdown about the fish and we'll theorise a little bit about what makes them tick. And I'm going to throw to Steve for this first one a bit of a breakdown and understanding of the annual cod cycle. What do they get up to in a 12-month period, and what can we learn about that as anglers? And there's kind of two sides to that: spawning age fish, like the bigger fish, and the little fish. Steve, can you give us your views?
Yep, thank you. So basically, I've had privilege and I suppose honour. Like I've been really fortunate how it's come about that I'm really passionate about these fish, but I get to work with them, every day and look at what they do and how they operate and what goes on. The real basic stuff is there's daylight hours are a real trigger for the fish in their upcoming into their spawning, and obviously the temperature increases and decreases. Whatever we come up with, particularly, and I'll try and it'll be focused a little bit on Murray cod in Lake Eildon, just to sort of keep it a bit more centralised, and every place is a little bit different. But the Murray cod in Eildon are extremely well, not extremely catchable, more catchable than normal in that sort of October, November time, in that pre-spawning. So what they do is that they'll condition up in the winter, and they tend to eat bigger food, big baits, not very often, but you get the bigger fish in the winter. And that's been a really big change over the last few years, people targeting big fish with big baits in the winter. That was virtually unheard of before, even the last 4 or 5 years. So what we've come across, and I get to hand feed these things, on a weekly basis, metre-long cod. So you get to look at their behaviours, and whatever we come up with, they'll change. They don't read the books; they do their own thing. But just a couple of the prime examples are, the standards are in that pre-spawning. They'll have a big feed up. They'll virtually gorge themselves and be really active. They'll go around and pair up, and then once they get to the spawning time, they're virtually uncatchable. They just won't touch anything. I've fished from in 10 foot of water where it's really clear and run every lure you can think of past their nose, and they won't touch anything. They just shut down. And I'm wearing my shirt tonight, not fishery, so I can say a few things that I wouldn't normally be allowed to say. So I'm usually fairly bound by the government. But I was talking to a bloke actually yesterday. We're on the lake last night and didn't catch a bloody fish. There you go. So, and he was talking to me. He said, "Why do they shut down at that particular time?" And I'll try and be respectful about it, but the way I said it to him. But I said, if you put it in your head and you think about it and you think you're having sex once a year, and if someone says you're about to do the act and someone says, "Do you want a hamburger?" you probably put the hamburger off for a little while. So that's how I explained it. So what they do, they'll just shut down. If we go and feed the fish, we can throw lumps of bread out there and they'll eat it. They'll eat anything when they're on, in our production ponds. When they go into that spawning behaviour, they won't eat. They just don't. They've got other things in their mind. I don't know what that feel like, but anyway. But then when they're on their nest, and when like places like Copetown and Eildon, you can still fish all year round. When they're on the nest, they become really territorial and aggressive. We've seen them. You can sit there and watch them sit on a nest, hover over their eggs, and the male will look after the eggs. And if a carp swims within 2-3 metres, 10 feet, they'll just roar out and belt them. They hit them out of aggression. They're not hungry. They're not feeding. They're chasing stuff away. So that time of year, particularly, if you use big, bright, aggressive baits, they'll tend to hit them. And they're catchable then. The smaller fish, the ones that are not quite mature enough to breed, you can catch them pretty much all the time. And particularly in Eildon, along that wall area, the smaller fish are quite catchable. There's a lot of fish there, but they get a bit lure smart. They get sick. There's lures going past their nose, all day, every day. A couple of the big factors are, and I'm really spoiled, again, like I said, it only takes me 5 minutes to get there, but I'd never fish there over a weekend in the summer months. The boat traffic and the carry-on, and it just shuts them down a little bit. We get it there during the week and at peak times, and I had a real good run. Well, it sounds like a good run. About this time last year, and I got 5 cod in a day that were, the smallest was 82 and the best one was 99. I didn't crack the metre, and I've got photos of them all and everything, that sort of stuff. But it sounds like a really good day, but I had probably 7 hours that day of casting lures I never got a touch. So I got 3 in the morning and two just before dark. And it's the sort of place, when we fish it like fairly regularly, we knock off work and go and have a fish and do that sort of stuff. But you can spend all day out there and they'll bite for half an hour, an hour at a set time, and then they'll shut down again. That's just what it's like. So the be all and end all of the whole thing is, the only real secret to it is time on the water. That's about it.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting you make the comment that the little fish can be caught year round through that winter period. My personal experience in a number of waterways has been that the smaller fish can almost become, where'd they go? It's interesting that you've used that they're kind of maybe a bit quieter, but they're still just as catchable. I've found them like where'd they go?
No, bit of a misrepresentation, but if you're fishing Eildon in like June, July, you won't catch a small cod.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
You'll catch really big cod and really big yellows and not anything else.
Yeah, and so in that period where cod your big cod are on the nest and that water is warming, your small cod then actually start to get active and can be caught in numbers again leading into the summer. And
a little male that's only maybe 400 or 500 mil long, he'll be fertile and he'll be going around trying to do the job.
Yeah, right.
So they'll be really active. It's the same as, like, again, the observations, we've got Murray cod, we've got brood ponds on site, and we've got what we call plankton ponds, which are little fish grow in. Then other ponds that have all bits and pieces, all different things. A real giveaway, any of the cod ponds, you'll never see ducklings on them.
Right.
They just, and particularly in the winter, if a duck lands in the water in the winter, they tend to feed not very often, but they'll have a big feed and it might last them a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
They've got no hesitation eating a black duck.
They're happy to look for a high value feed.
Yeah.
That aggression during the spawn is pretty well documented. I wasn't a local Victorian incident, but I was at Copeton in September, I think it's about 3 or 4 years ago, and had a real good chance at a $1.20 fish swam across the surface and went at my electric motor and actually tail slapped the boat. And there was just no other plausible explanation than it was defending a nest. I think you, Thomas, have had one each motor as well, haven't you?
Yeah, like, I reckon it stirred up a bit of a controversy where people thought, I just ran into a rock or whatever, but seriously, it was around 3 o'clock in the morning. It was wouldn't have been more than half an hour or so into the session, and everything was just pin drop silence. It was one of those nights, not a breath of wind, nothing. I knew I had a couple big trees or whatever, a bit of a bank sort of lined up, so I knew what I was fishing, even though it was almost pitch black darkness. And just by feel, by casting, I was getting a gauge of the distance. I knew I was close to the bank, and like the way I was retrieving, I knew I was, without really seeing it, you don't really know, but I knew I had a good percentage of my cast or retrieve was in the zone. I knew there's no standing timber, there's no trees around me, there's nothing, and all of a sudden it was just like someone grabbed the shaft of my electric motor and tried to rip it off my boat. And I thought that was very peculiar, and I honestly thought that I did run into a tree or whatever, but sun came up and I went back past the bank. No trees, no rock, nothing whatsoever. And I don't know if some of you would have seen the photos I posted on social media where you've got individual teeth marks, and you can actually see, I'm sure a lot of you looked inside of a cod's mouth, you could see like the teeth are on pads, basically. Top and bottom jaws are like pretty much quartered on each side of the mouth, top and bottom. And you can actually see each individual tooth that's latched onto it, top and bottom. It's like you could almost make a mould of his jaw out of it. It was something freaky, and it's always something that people say, or you've heard crap happen like that, and then it happens to you, you go, no, it's true.
It's real.
It's true.
It's real.
Just another thing, in the winter with these, like the big baits, you look at the size of some of those big megabass plastics, and you think they're big. I got one good fish last year that was 78 centimetres, and the water in the winter is crystal clear. That's another, it's a great time to be throwing some lures around. And I hooked onto a good fish, a 78, and had him on the way up, and the big black shadow came up from underneath it, and you just reminded me with the teeth marks. This thing came up and grabbed the cod almost up to its pecs and dragged down the body and put teeth marks right down. I got good photos of it and that, but it would have been, I don't know, if it wasn't 1.3 or 4, it's a seriously big cod, and they certainly have. But another big thing that a lot of people that don't fish it regularly realise that in Eildon, before the irrigation season starts and it's stable or filling, it's much, much better to fish than when it's dropping. As soon as those big irrigation flows start, or environmental flows that we need to run down the river, that lake starts to drop, that certainly changes the behaviour of the fish. It really does change their feeding behaviour.
I'm pretty sure everyone on this panel will agree with you on that, and that's one of the things. We'll get to some of this stuff, but we always look at what's the inflow and outflow. It doesn't stop us going, but it actually gives you a really good idea of your chances. Positive flows into Eildon are, yes, we are on. The moment it's starting to drop the guts out of it, the confidence just evaporates, doesn't it? Yep. I've got a personal rule with Eildon. I've learnt this the hard way. I stopped fishing Eildon in December when everyone finishes work, leading into Christmas. I don't go there until May, when the irrigation flows stop. 100% doesn't mean you can't go there and catch cod. It's just harder. That's all. It's unfortunate. Nesting cod or paired up cod, can we get a reaction bite out of them by a lure choice?
Not really. When I say not really, you'll still occasionally you'll catch a fish, but there's no real firm 100% rule. I've seen it, and I've thrown everything in the world at them when they're really doing that. They pair up, and there'll be maybe 2 or 3 males chasing a female around. They carry, and Goldens are the same, and they won't touch anything. They just don't. They're not interested. Whereas a week later, when they're actually on eggs, and you'll often see eggs in Eildon, and in some of the clear lakes, you'll see patches of eggs, and the fish will hang on it. They'll smash things in, and there's nothing too big and too bright that you can throw at them that they won't hit. And might as well touch on it now because it'll come up that even though there's a closed season, there's no closed season for cod in Eildon. They'll breed in there, but there's no recruitment, or there's very limited recruitment. So they'll spawn, they'll lay eggs, they'll fertilise eggs, they'll successfully do all that. But when they hatch, there's no food there. So virtually what happens is those larvae, they just drop off and die. Even the Goldens, I've seen Goldens swarm up and 10 or 15 males will be pushing a female out of the water and they'll melt, the water will go all creamy, but there's no recruitment. The big trick in it is that when the fish spawn, we produce plankton in ponds that's exactly the right size for those fish to eat, so that we get massive survivals, like 90% survival. Over 3 years in Eildon, we put an extra, not a million cod, we put an extra million cod on top of the normal stockings over 3 years. And what I did, I marked them with a fluorescent dye called calcine, and that just marks the calcium in their bone structure, so we can shine it with a light and tell it they've had that done. I don't want to waffle too much, but I think it's a bit interesting. When we went back and did the tests, 99.8% of the fish that were caught back out of there were from the hatchery. They had that dye in there. So they'll breed in there, and breeding doesn't mean recruitment. So they'll do all the right stuff, but they mightn't, it doesn't have the young. Actually, I'll hand these out. There's some little cod that hatched Monday. So just pass them around and have a look at them. That's what they are. They start out pretty incredible.
They're sea monkeys.
So with you were saying like all these big cod being like say caught or whatever, and then just going off what you've said about the hatcheries, some of these metre 10, 20, you encountered possibly 130 plus calibre of fish. Would you say that's like a fish that's originally grown like one of the OG fish, or is that a stock fish from one of the first releases?
Yeah, a bit of both actually. So some of the things that fisheries put on their social media stuff, but what I've done with quite often we put some of our old brood fish in there. When I started there a long time ago, we had a lot of big old male fish that they're like me, they're not very useful when it comes to breeding. So I put a lot of fish in there. I put a whole, probably 3 years worth of fish in there that were, I think the smallest one was a metre. So we put some 1.2s and 3s in there. So some of those will show up. But there's always been, since I was bloody, I could barely walk, there's been big cod in the Delatite forever. They're always there, and there's always been there. So there's some natural recruitment. And I think because we've changed things so much, and even now, virtually what happens now is the cod will spawn at exactly the right water level and right temperature, and then the lake will drop all of a sudden. It just stuffs things up. Yeah. So the demand for the irrigation, that's what it's there for. There is natural recruitment, but it's a really small percentage. There's fish been there forever. Yep. Do you want to run that question?
Yeah, so the question there is, can you break up the calendar year into what the fish are doing when, basically? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a variable. So this year, even at Snobs, we had the earliest spawners we've ever had. In the first week of October. That's never happened. Usually first week of November. So within those time frames, and right now it's that cold. It's cooled off the last 2 weeks. It's ridiculous. Like yesterday morning was, the temperature thing said it was 4 degrees and it felt like -1. And we've got little fish that are like that that we're trying to grow. So as much as it's a seasonal thing, and I could say, November or December, it's variable. So when those water temperatures are in the zone that they're in is 19 degrees, 20 degrees, they'll spawn. So just before that, and you've got to remember, it's like any other freshwater or native fish, or native fish, not the trout, but on an increasing water temperature, they'll be much more likely to be catchable. Even if your water temp's 19 and it goes to 22, they'll be more active. It's just the metabolism just picks up. But if it's 24 and it goes down to 22, they just get the trigger to shut down. So it's increasing water temperatures will kick it on. And when I could never put a calendar, I can't say a date, but I'll say when the zone that you're fishing is at 19 degrees, they'll be breeding. But remember that the shoreline around Lake Eildon, it's easy to throw numbers around, but just for a minute, just pause and have a think about it. It's 550 kilometres around. So at the Eildon end, at the deep end, or around Fraser's and the Jews Creek, that water will be completely different temperature to Bonnie Doon or to the Goulburn Inlet. So it's impossible to put a date on it. But if you use your sounder, and if you get your temperature down a little bit deeper, and they're not in deep water, they won't be in water more than 6 or 8 metres. Now, very rarely. If that water's that 19 degree mark, they'll be hard to catch. And that's not after it's been 19. When it's first 19, they'll do it straight up. Then after that, they'll just go back into their normal system. And then after they spawn, then they'll want to have a big feed. After they've hatched the eggs and got finished all the thing. And the cycle's not very long, so they lay eggs. Those eggs will hatch in 8, 9, 10 days. Then they move on and go and do their thing. It's spasmodic across the whole lake. I'm sorry, it's not. I could love to define it, but you can't really with a big lake.
Just on that, John, Steve's made a good point there, and it's a good question. We physically this year actually chased it the whole way. I reckon we could. And to answer that question is time on the water. Keeping an eye on your sounder every time you go out and actually see the temperature and where these fish are sitting, and you can actually map it over weeks and see where they're going and what they're doing. So it's a great question, but like Steve said, it's a very grey area, and you've got to actually go out there and actually see it for yourself. So
another real giveaway, and it's a real cracker, and we saw it a couple of days ago. Last time I was down 2 weeks ago. When you see 2 or even 3 big cod up off the bottom and out, not hiding under a log or something, you probably won't catch them. They're chasing each other around when it's that time, and you can throw everything at them, and you know they're there and they're big. They won't play.
What Kish was talking about there, the fish that we actually followed for a period of a couple of months, all of us here. There came a period where I had 10 of them on my sounder at one time. 10 fish under one side scan image, and they could not be caught.
You got images to prove that too.
Yeah.
I saw the pictures.
Yeah, there was a lot of cod in one place, and they just had other things on their mind by then. We actually got a couple of very different, hard to describe whacks. They weren't eats. I think they were nudges or tail whacks, or they weren't fish wanting to eat your bait though. They were wanting you to get out of their space.
And going back to this young man's question at the front, like in regards to getting these fish to bite, me and John, you probably guys would have seen a couple of weeks ago where we both got 1 fish each, and like back to what Steve said, it just switched on. And just to give you an idea, one took a spinnerbait, one took a 10-inch mag draft. So there wasn't one particular bait that switched it on. I reckon you go back to Steve's point, it was just the light switched on, and they wanted to have a crack at what was in front of them. And they were, John, probably 15 minutes apart each other?
Yeah, the typical Eildon short bite window. Yeah. Very, an hour's a long bite window there, I think. Well, that was a good chat. Didn't expect that slide to go for that long. But we'll start moving in a little bit into breaking it down a little bit further to about when the fish switch on and when you can get a bite. I'll kick it off first by just saying I always took the view, and it was born out of experience, that dawn was the best time to catch Murray cod. Dusk was the next best, and the third best was any time throughout the night. That was my experience in the past, and it's actually significantly different now. I'm a big believer in a bunch of other factors, and I'm not talking about the barometer perhaps bringing on a bite, but Saluna factors. And we've followed these fairly religiously this year. I know you have, Thomas, as well, Andy. And it's been amazing, the number of fish that we've caught in business hours, middle of the day. And it's not just Eildon, we're talking about absolutely any waterway here. Mulwala's actually a really good place for this, actually, where you'll, especially if there's a comp running and catches are actually being logged between 11 and midday, for example. 38 fish got caught. Why was that? If you go back and look at a number of factors, and of course the barometer is going to be one of those, but your Saluna, moon above, moon below, moonrise, moon set, are huge on these fish, in my opinion. And I'd love to hear down the table. I know I'll get a lot of furious agreement from the guys I fish with, but Steve, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Even when I worked in a big enclosed research system for 10 or 12 years, Andy might have even come to work experience. And we had absolute nil natural light in there. There was nothing. It was all controlled lighting, and in the end we ended up having 24-hour daylight because it was just production. It was just feeding and trying to get on. When weather conditions changed outside, storm activity, big drops in the barometer, when things change, the feeding pattern of the fish changed. When we had built up the full moon, just before and just after, they fed better. And not just guesswork, but it showed in the feeding, and we had it all logged and registered what they could feed, all demand feeding and stuff. And they fed at certain times for no reason we could ever explain. And even, caught in an aquarium will do it. You look at a fish in a tank, and one day they just get all fired up and they want to feed, and you can throw as many yabbies you want at them, they'll keep eating them. And next time you go to feed it, they won't do it. We don't know enough about them yet. We never will. That's why they're so mysterious.
Andy, Tom, we heard from you. Your views on the moon phase and what we've learnt with major and minor bite windows with using fishing almanacs.
Yeah, definitely. Look, the almanac's something that, as John said earlier, touched on, basically become our Bible. In a nutshell, it become that effective looking at these bite window times, which John's got showing up there. We basically, for in excess of, it was probably 6 weeks on Eildon, we made sure we were there an hour before it. We fished through one morning, John and I. We fished for, what was it, 2.5, 3 hours, and had 5 fish in the boat, missed 2 more. Not a fish under 80 centimetres. Packed up, went home. That was it. And that was spot on around these bite window times that we've been working on. They're not secrets. I remember as a kid growing up, there's a thing called Rotherby's or Rothery's Time and Tide. You could get a little tide computer. It was out in the 80s. It's all on Saluna activity. So bite windows around what the moon cycle is doing in relation. So you've got sunset and sunrise obviously are good. These moon lunar times have a huge factor on it. Cycle-wise, personally, I like, especially if I want to fish topwater, the dark, so the new moon. Around that, just I find fish are more aggressive to come to the surface. The full's still good, but probably not quite, and that's only my personal choice. I'm not sure what the other guys here, whether they agree or disagree on that. But these almanacs, if there's one thing I would say, pay attention to them. You can get them down to like apps on your phones and look at bite windows, even moonset, moonrise times. If we used to go up fish Copeton, and it was all about, oh, well, we're here, we'll just fish moonrise, moonset. Now, that might mean we were fishing 11 p.m. till 4 a.m., and then we'd go home, go to bed, sleep for 2 hours, get up, go back out. Or if the bite was on, you'd fish right through, but you're there for 4 days and you've fished, 3.5 days with no sleep. So just focusing effort in those big windows when we can, it's paying results.
Yeah, for sure. I've got to the point now where, as much as I love dawn's been my thing, I think, for a lot of fishermen, right? That you want to be on the water at dawn. If I had a choice between a major bite window in the middle of the afternoon or dawn, I could only be there for one of them, I'd go for the major bite window in the middle of the afternoon. That's how much confidence I've actually got in it now. And that's purely by just seeing the results. I've seen dawn and dusk pass too many times, and then seen Saluna periods work. It's convinced me. And I've actually gone off significantly fishing Eildon at night. It's not an easy place to fish at night due to the timber and the steep walls make it very dark, and I find I spend half the time in the trees. But I will hang out or go out a bit earlier if there's going to be one of those bite windows. If you can coincide a Saluna period in with a dawn or a dusk, hang on, things should be good. Thomas, I know you're similar with your views on this.
Everything you guys have just touched on, I couldn't agree more. It's sorry to go back to the game fishing side of things, but it's amazing those completely different marlin, tuna, all these giant fish living in the ocean, nothing whatsoever to do with the food chain of a Murray cod, but it's almost like clockwork. They feed spot on the exact same as Murray cod. There's a hot bluefin tuna bite happening, the cod are firing. Even the marlin, if you're not watching your teaser, you could have had 10 marlin come up to your teaser for the day and fade off just because you got them interested, but they're not really feeding. That could be on the moon, but you go a couple days ago, leading up to the moon, you can't keep a bait in the water because as soon as one comes up behind the boat, he'll eat your bait straight away. Same with the cod. And if you line this moon phase, like Saluna phases, up with the pre-spawn and all this, people are wondering, how do you catch so many fish? Not just how many, but quality fish in a session. Like you were saying, all these fish that you guys were marking up on the sounder, there was a real purple patch where we went through, it was just like, not how you went, but how many did you get and how big were they? Like, you definitely found classes of fish. Like, I know for me, I'm not blowing wind up myself, but I didn't find a fish under 80 centimetres this year.
They were quality.
Yeah.
I reckon we're lucky to find one under 75, I reckon.
Exactly right. And then you have some people that, no discredit, you catching fish, that's awesome. You're in the right direction. Some people are going out and smacking half a dozen fish. Yeah, that's sick. But like a lot of those fish are like 50, 60, 70 centimetre fish. That's awesome. If you catch it and you're happy, that's cool. But I know a lot of the guys, especially us up here, we do have that one bite, giant fish. That's what we're there for. And if we're encountering, half a dozen or so fish of that calibre, and we're only chasing the one bite, oh man, it's got something to speak for itself. That this saloon activity definitely plays a part. Line up with barometer, spawning. There's all these little key factors. If you line those up perfectly, you're going out there fishing with confidence. You're going, like, driving up to the lake with a boat on the back. My mindset's already like, yeah, I'm going to do it today. Like, it's going to happen. Not, I don't know, what do I do? Where do I go? Like, no, I'm just going in balls deep. Like, it's going to happen, and we're doing this. Yeah.
That deep. Got a question here.
Just think with the moon phases. Will different moon phases affect what lures cod will bite better, or is it just they'll hit anything during those bite times?
I'm fairly one-dimensional. I'll be completely honest with you. I've become, for Murray cod in impoundments, a swimbait angler. So I'm probably rare and reluctant to fish other methods. So I'll throw it down the table. I know, Steve, you fish probably... I know you fish swimbaits, but you fish spinnerbaits and crankbaits a fair bit more probably than we do.
Yeah, big spinnerbaits. My go-to is big spinnerbaits, yeah. Mainly because they're much more fishable and forgiving, and you get a lot of lures back. You don't lose quite as many, but they certainly work. And I'll fish, when I say big spinnerbaits, I'll fish stuff with 5 and 6 inch blades on there and 8 or 10 inch plastics without hesitation until your arms get sore, and then you'll go and change to something else. But you've got to stir them up a bit. Yeah.
How heavy would they be?
Usually 2 ounce plus heads. Yeah, and it varies a bit. I've changed a little bit fairly recently into fishing, like the big log jams, and the heads of the gullies, and fishing. And I'll change them up myself. I'll get a much lighter spinnerbait with a big, heavy, like a real decent hook and a stinger hook just as big, and really big blades, and let them. You'll get 90% of your hits on the drop in that sort of area. You throw them in there, and just as they helicopter down, you'll get hit then. So I'll really lighten off on the lead then. So it's a really exciting. It's my second favourite way of fishing. I mean, that excitement when you get the hit on the drop, it's only second to surface stuff. I love that surface stuff. It's good.
We get hit on the swimmies on the drop a lot. Kish, fishing alongside Kish this winter, saw him get belted multiple times whilst his swim bait was slowly swimming down. So it's a really important time to hang on, isn't it?
Yeah, I lost one when we last fished together too on the drop. So you can switch off. Cod fishing, like back to what Thomas was saying, when you're chasing that one big bite, it becomes a mental game. It's not all about, catching multiple fish. It's that one big fish that's going to make you happy. And it's so easy to switch off. Like that morning, me and John probably would have started at first light. So we're probably 5 hours into our session already, 4 hours in, and, got smacked within a metre of water, and it buried me. And all we could do is go up there and pull it out of the log. And you're just so frustrated because that hit comes so quick. And the minute you switch off, you're gone. So you got to, when that bait's dropping, don't ever think, 9 times out of 10, your hits either come on the drop or a metre or two into your retrieve, I've found. But, not saying I've caught fish right at the boat as well. But going back to what we were talking about on the drop is probably the most important part to switch on.
And you got to remember that these people here are absolutely fanatical, and we get a bit crazy on it, but it's so easy to get out there. If you get there without a game plan and you set out for the day and say, I've fished for half an hour, and then I'll change to a smaller lure and try and catch a fish, you won't catch big cod. You've got to stick to it and just work at it and work at it and work at it. And you'll have days where you'll absolutely catch less than nothing. It'll drive you mad. But then if you stick to your plan and you keep the big lures and keep the hard work on there, you'll get them. You end up getting them.
And I really hope that we've driven home the point that just because dawn's passed and the sun's up and your bite's not over. There's a whole bunch of other factors that could bring on the best cod bite you've ever had later in that day. And I used to actually go, oh, it's over. Go chase yellows, go home, whatever it might be. And it's only through persisting and trying other things that we've got to the point to go, oh, it doesn't just have to be dawn or dusk. Slow learners sometimes. So just before we move on from the moon aspect of it.
Question, Johnny.
Oh, question there. Sorry, no, right.
Just quick on. So when you're saying the moon phases, are you looking at tides as well?
Well, I'm not looking at tides, but your Soluna charts are inherently linked, of course, with the tides. And largely, if you go horizontally across, you're getting the same information about a tide change. I think Copeton Dam, for example, you go across to Coffs Harbour, work out what the tide change will be at Coffs Harbour. That's your major bite window at Copeton Dam.
Just on that quickly too, not related to Murray Cod, but if you talk to a lot of the Barra guys up north that fish the freshwater dams, they go off tide. So, what's not to say, we've actually had this discussion and tried to implement it, but the moon phase for cod just seems to be more productive than tide change. But if you go up and chase Barra, I'd be following the tidal change for sure.
Now, none of us, I don't think, are any moon gurus at reading these charts. I've got an app on my phone, and I've got it set on Eildon as a location, and I look at it to go, can I go fishing this weekend? And I scroll forward to that day, and it gives me an image of lots of fish, meaning a good day for fishing. I look at the major and minor bite windows, and they work when I can go, and I go. It's not like I've got this worked out. I've just worked out how to use an app and the importance of it to me. So I encourage you to consider that. Got a question here.
What app is that?
It costs a lot of money,
You got to
mate.
pay for it. It's about $2.
Yeah, I've got it here. I thought someone had come up with that one. So it's called Soluna Table, Fishing and Hunting. John's got it. I've got it. Kish, I'm pretty sure you've got it as well.
Yep.
Just having a look now. Today's about half, 3 out of 6 fish symbols for Eildon.
On that too, don't just go off the fish symbol.
Yeah.
Yeah? Don't just go, there's got to be 7 fish lining up to catch fish. We've gone out and when there's a 2 fish symbol and caught fish. It's just a good gauge. That's
Just
all.
on that, there was a 6 fish day yesterday at Eildon, and Steve couldn't catch a fish, so...
And a sharply rising barometer too.
Yep. But it is good. You can set it for any location. There's a few things. So I think it costs about $3 or something, and gives you all the info, major and minor feeding times, the moon phase, moonrise, moonset, sunrise, sunset, sun transit. I don't know what that one is, but...
Are you fishing the moonset or the moonrise, or are you fishing times before it?
You'll find that these Soluna major minor bite periods line up. I'm pretty sure most minor bite periods are moon up, moon down. Yeah. Moon up is... Go on, Kish.
We've got a story here. So me and John, we fished Copeton probably 2017, I think it was. And we went there in the first 2 days or the first 24 hours, we dropped the boat in and again, fish stacked up and we just couldn't find them. And they were sitting in deeper water. And we clicked onto it, a day later and we started fishing the moon phase and it was all moonrise. So we had this thing where we'd be out in the water at 12:30 at night and we'd just be sitting there pitch black and you'd be looking over the hill and this massive moon comes up and it was just like, yep, on. And if it was not me, it was John. And this bite period was just insane for half an hour and then it went dead quiet.
And then we could follow that, like obviously it'd be nearly an hour later the next night.
Yeah.
And then the next night.
Yeah.
That's when we would get our bites when that moon rose.
And not to back that up, a guy we were camping next to was doing the same thing and he was getting results.
But what I know now is that on that moon set, which would have been mid-morning or something like that.
Mid-morning, yeah.
Would have probably been a really good time to fish and get some sleep during the night.
Yeah. Yep.
That question was, all your saltwater lures, can they be used to catch freshwater fish? Andy, go for it.
As you said, a fish is a fish. If they're hungry enough, they'll eat. As Steve said, they'll eat anything at times. So there's no reason to say, no, not right. So same as everything you see, it's a fish doesn't, we hope it doesn't see a hook and know, hang on, I don't eat that. So hopefully if you can mimic something that's natural that they think, or potentially if it's in an aggression cycle, that you just get an aggression strike out of it. Doesn't matter what you do. It's probably about percentages for me. I fish swim baits, I would say 99% of the time now, particularly in impoundments for cod. Reason I'm doing that, I'm fishing big lures that try and mimic the bait that these things are eating, especially in Eildon. And pretty simple, like all of us here, we're really chasing big fish, so I throw big lures. Big baits for big fish. only because when one wants to eat, they will generally commit and eat a big lure properly. They don't muck around with it. That's probably more my mindset on it, but there's no reason why a cod won't eat a saltwater lure.
100, like what you're going off, I had a very similar mentality. Like, I went through a phase where I was throwing X-Rap 20s and 30s, the same that we were trialling for big giant bluefin. I was still catching cod on them. Yeah, 100%. They definitely were.
What about colours?
Colours, that becomes each to their own, but like we were saying about the fish on aggression to bright colour lures or whatever onto a nest, I think that starts to become a personal thing and confidence thing, but I still, personally, I think more so the dirty water situation or clear water situation. Like me personally, it does come down to confidence. Say like my whaler, if you picked out of my box of lures, you go catch a fish on this one, just out of confidence, I'll be happy to throw that. Providing the action's right and I think I'm in the zone, colour for me will get pushed aside. I'd be happy to throw a black one, white one, fluoro, natural colour, whatever. But come to Eildon, I like to think that, yeah, they do get a good look at it, and even comes to the point like throwing blades with spinnerbaits. I've even painted one side of the blade just so it's not flash, flash, flash. It's like flash, and then they get that black side, and then flash again. So it's not so bang right there. It's a bit more subtle. Even painting the blades completely black, more the vibration aspect.
The problem with colours is it's pretty hard to do a scientific, foolproof study on that. I'm not a big colour person with any of the lures that I've thrown. It's not really my thing. I don't get hung up on it. I won't not use a lure because it's this colour. But I think in the style of fishing that I like, throwing natural swimming swim baits, I also like it to look like the forage that's available there. I think you're ticking every box then. It swims like a redfin. It looks like a redfin. It's coloured like a redfin. It should get eaten. That's kind of where I come from there in the clear water lakes. So let's see if I can summarise that question. Do essentially colours matter in a hot bite? Is that it? Yeah. Anyone want to have a go at that?
I disagree. Why? Because I've caught meter cod in a hot bite with fluoro swim baits. So, what's fluoro that swims in our waterway? And if the hot bite's on, the hot bite's on. But me personally, colour-wise, I know these guys have probably spoken about it, but I like to stick natural. But yeah, in terms of colours, I disagree because I've personally caught trophy cod with fluoro colours.
So the question is, where did these swim baits come from? Have they always been here, or are they a new thing? A lot of our tackle is derived from the USA, Japan, and Europe. Bass fishing, basically largemouth bass and European pike, is where the swim bait scene came from. Andy, do you want to? I know you love your swimmies, so do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, for sure.
Andy's the guru behind this.
Far from
every
guru.
time we have an argument every day about get this lure, I can't get it.
Yeah. No. Look, swim baits have been around for a long, long time. I guess in Australia, people's obsession with big fish, and a lot of it gets back to, in the cod scene, a lot of these big impoundments that we're stocking with fish, and the fish average size is getting bigger and bigger, like Eildon is now. People are looking for the lure to catch bigger and bigger fish consistently. Things that are easy to swim, easy to throw. Well, easier, I wouldn't say they're easy, but it's a lot easier to throw a 10-inch swim bait than someone's trying to throw a 10-inch hard body. So I think a lot of it's just having access to the product. Worldwide, swim baits are growing anyway. They have been very much a niche market bass product for decades. But even now, there's smaller swim baits coming out. Guys are targeting flathead, even bream, estuary perch, bass on, 50, 60, 70 millimetre long swim baits, which are just downsized versions of the 8 and 10-inch lures that we're throwing for cod, really.
And the fuss, why? What is it about swim baits? For me, there is nothing you can tie on that is closer to having live bait without it being live bait. Everything else we throw is an impression of a bait, like a spinnerbait. What does that look like? We can theorise about it. Like, is it a flashing school of fish darting away? I don't know. Who knows what cod think when they see a spinnerbait or a hard vibrating diver? because fish don't swim like that. They don't swim that hard and put out that much vibration. But a swim bait, the look and the feel and the gentle glide of it, and like they don't have a massive kick of the tail. It's just a gentle swim. It looks real. So you can catch fish, in my opinion, on those time and time again, and fish won't wise up to them because it looks like a fish and they've got to eat. Get caught on a spinnerbait once, you might consider not doing that again. That's just my take on it.
I think one thing, particularly with the swim baits, is because they're so natural and the action of them, they're so good now, you can work them really, really slowly, and fish get a long time to have a look at them. I'd say, I don't know, probably 90% of the people that lure fish Eildon for cod just troll lures around behind boats. And these fish get, I'm not saying fish are overly smart because we still know how to catch them, but they get lure smart, especially along that wall. The wall gets fished a lot because there's no sticks and structure and stuff there, and there's fish there anyway, but it's easy to fish. You don't lose lures and it's simple and all that sort of thing. Those fish that get sick of lures or wake up to when they're not natural, the swim baits are just so realistic and so lifelike that they don't hesitate. I think they're just, even the most educated cod will still have a crack at a swim bait.
Yeah, they look like a fish. They've got to eat.
Just on that quickly, there'll be some of us blokes in here that have never caught a fish on a swim bait. And when you do it, it will stick in your mind forever. It's unbelievable. It's a different bite. And me and John and Andy are like kids when we catch a fish on a swim bait and get it in the boat. We're just jumping up and down because you've actually tricked that fish to eat a real life looking bait. Going back to like John said, like hard body and spinnerbait, all great baits. But now you're starting to actually really trick these fish because there's no massive vibration. There's no massive, offset wobble. There's none of that. You're actually presenting a finesse bait.
The last little aspect I wanted to discuss was the obvious one of the barometer. And I took these screenshots yesterday from a page called mansfieldweather.com.au, which is the weather station that I use for Eildon. Because obviously barometer is very elevation dependent, and what your smartphone says can be really, really wrong for what it actually is at Eildon. So when I go back and fill in the fishing diary at the end of the day, hopefully with a good result, not donuts, I always go to this website for what did the weather do today, and I'm always looking for a number of things, but more the second slide here, barometer information for the previous 24 hours. And it'll give a trend there from the minimum that occurred yesterday to the maximum that occurred yesterday, then the breakdowns that occurred in the 24 hours of the day that you're recording there. And it gives you both what happened on that day and what was the overall barometer trend. And it shows that yesterday you had a fairly sharp rise of 16 points in the barometer over the course of a day, which should have been a reasonable day on Eildon, Steve.
And Steve still couldn't catch fish.
This seems to be a common theme. What that doesn't show is the rain and wind and hail, and it was very uncomfortable. Because I haven't fished the lake for about probably once in 6 months I've been away. I was just keen to get out there, and I had a crack anyway. What you will realise if you look at the panel up here, I'm by far the oldest, so my method for going up there is when it's a really calm day and it's a really nice weather and everything's all beautiful, I'll go out and have a crack, or when I get time. But and also I like a beer, so I don't often fish at dawn, I go dusk.
I think I just want to say one thing there that you touched on that's really important to pay attention to. Steve said it's the first time in about 6 months I've fished there. Now, one thing, and my whale at Eildon doesn't really matter anywhere, but if you're fishing one place or one location regularly, pay attention to what's happening. Don't just go out, go fishing. Oh yeah, the moon's good, this is all good, let's go. Look at the water, look at everything, look at the activity, pay attention to your sounder, look for bait, water temp, thermoclines, all this stuff. But if you're fishing the same area regularly and religiously, you find these patterns. Yeah. And that's one thing that we really nailed in.
You often find the same fish over and over again. I've caught probably the one fish there. I think the first time I caught it was probably about under 80, and I've caught that now and it's 98, so I'll need to catch him again. But
where is he?
I've got it marked on the GPS. But not only do you learn the habit, another thing, if you get really confident and the more you go there and you know you've caught fish in the area, even if you don't look at your sounder, if you really think there's a fish there, fish it like there is. Don't just cast in hope. Really, really concentrate and say, I believe my instinct that there's a fish there. Even if you see it on the sand, obviously it's a hell of a telltale. But if you really be confident, you shouldn't be casting anywhere you don't think there's a fish. Put it that way.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. Yep, and make your cast count. I look at it like I fished with a couple of guys. One guy, we'd fish Eildon together, and look, I don't fish with him anymore, and a lot of it was out of frustration. But we'd pull up to a really good-looking bank, and he'd sit a cast and a half out and cast back in. I'm like, what are we doing? He goes, it's too snaggy. I don't want to lose lures. I'm like, well, that's where the big fish are. That's where these fish are we're chasing. So if it means we're going to use it, we've got a lure pole. Let's get these things back. They all hurt if you lose them, so I don't like losing them. So John just makes his wife get in the water and retrieve it. But, yeah, pay attention and fish the water properly. You can't say that enough.
Got a question over here. So the question there is about thermocline and cod.
I don't think that the fish in particular to the thermocline, but the trout, the carp, the roach, the reddies definitely respond to the thermocline. Like those that fish for yellows heavily in Eildon know that the thermocline determines how far down the trees they'll sit, especially those that grub trees, like slow rolling plastics up trees. You can almost, by launching the boat and driving out to some reasonably deeper water, you can straight away go, oh yeah, they'll be 5 metres down, they'll be 10 metres down, whatever it is. But definitely my surface bites have coincided with a high thermocline. So it's obviously been in, like, say, the top 4 metres or something like that. And those days where I've found it hard doing my go-to routine sort of a thing, actually made an awesome day where it was around lunchtime and I was like getting ready for that moon transition for that midday. I purposely time my lunch breaks around that 9 o'clock or something. So I've had a good morning session, sit down, have a can of Coke, whatever it is, for half an hour, then get up and get going, and just don't stop until you pull through that midday bite time. Because I know that thermocline definitely does move throughout the day. Don't go into the mindset, it's down low or it's right up top. It'll definitely go up and down, especially determining winter to summer. To sort of see the thermocline or learn it, I know Lowrance or Simrad units do it very well, just because I go in only because that's what I use. Turn your clutter right up so you're picking up all the crap and it looks like almost like a blurry screen, like your screen's full of crap, and then just slowly back it off and you'll see two lines form. And it might only be just faint, but your clutter will be very, very distinct lines. It might be the space of 2 metres throughout the whole water, or it might only be 1 metre in thickness. But yeah, definitely determines where your bait will sit.
Another thing with thermoclines, don't underestimate the value of moving water. That lake moves, like where the incoming, like where the Goulburn comes in, the movement, or the big river, all those sort of things, where they come in, that moving water, you pick up. It looks like a thermocline, but you'll see a roll where the bait fish are and where all the action is. You'll see that lake actually has a flow through it, especially when they start to crank a little water out. That can be a help if you go a long way away from where the water's going out and where it's coming in. You'll see some movement, and the bait fish will gather there.
Back on the barometer for a sec, the effect on the fish. There's all kinds of theories, but my experience, the lived experience with the barrow is, give me a falling barometer any day as the prime time to go and target Murray cod. It was over the last 2 years I've done this quite a bit, probably at the risk of my life. Been home of an evening and seen a storm coming, and I've hooked up the boat and gone to Eildon to fish for 3 or 4 hours, and then hopefully survive the drive back home, which I have to this point, and get home, 4 a.m, 5 a.m. The number of times I've encountered good bites coinciding with poor weather coming and a dropping barometer, I'm very happy it's connected. The best session I've had there that ties in with this is 9 bites in 2 hours, which is fairly good going for Eildon. There was a question there. That's the question there is about what's the timing around the falling barometer. And I actually rang a friend today, Cam McGregor, who's a Murray cod guide, and I actually just wanted to chew his ear for a minute about just that. I was fishing with him 2 or 3 years ago in the Ovens River, and we'd fished all morning until it was about 11. We got 3 fish in 4 casts. Each one was stop, take photos, released, high five, go back, bang. It was like literally like that. And he made some commentary at the time, which I checked back with him today, is, the storm's due in about 12 hours. And that was what I wanted to check back with him today. He has got a view that it's anywhere from about 12 to 3 hours out before the front actually hits. That's not gospel. That's his view and his take on it. I'll say he knows his stuff as well. But I've also had it where the front has hit and you're in bad weather and the bite's still continuing. So I think personally that's a bit of a variable situation. But that was his view. Guys up on the panel, anyone got a view on that?
I'd say even more so for yellowbelly, for Goldens. That storm approach for 12 hours prior up until it hits, Goldens will just come on. You can fish sections that you've. I don't know who I talked to before about it. I had a big reservoir on a fish farm I worked at years ago, and we fished it religiously every night. There was not much to do up there in the middle of New South Wales at Condobolin. And this storm rolled in, and we didn't see the storm. You could just hear, and that sticky feeling. You could hear the thunder start to come. And we got yellowbelly every cast, and never caught another one there after that. They just yellowbelly really get stirred on, and their spawning activity will really coincide with that storm activity. It might be a good time to say stay safe a little bit too.
Yeah, definitely. I've got to say that I've pushed the envelope, doing just what we're talking about here, and I've nearly got zapped on Eildon. Yeah.
We fish the storm. We try and chase them. I fished one round at Eildon. When I said that we saw those Goldens try and spawn, and I panicked. I thought, oh shit, this is the end of the world. So I tied up to a tree, and the boat, I just thought, what the hell do you do? It got wild, like really wild, and snapped the keel off the bottom of the electric where it hit against the tree. That's dangerous, and lightning and crap everywhere. But we're mad, yeah.
Lightning's the one that really worries me, but gee, the fish love it. That's going nuts. Thomas, you got something there?
I was actually going to say that I launched from Juice Creek one big day, and Kish happened to be launching at Goffs Bay in, and we knew each other were on the lake. We organised to catch up and pull up for a bit of coffee, but had a bit of a chat, and none of us had a bite all morning until.
No, I had one that morning within the sticks, and we caught up, had a coffee. Yeah, and Thomas made the call to duck off back up Juice Creek way, and I sort of stuck to my guns. Like we talk about with John, you always got to have a plan A and a plan B. So I stuck with plan A and just wasn't working. And Thomas is calling me. He's like, "Mate, I'm getting hit." And I reckon you had what, 2 hits?
Yeah, 2-3 bites, especially like within about half an hour. I said, man, no, it's going to happen, especially because the wind was coming from my direction.
But I couldn't sense it because I was blocked where I was.
Yeah, and it was actually coming his way. And I had these bites, and I was like, man, either come over here or stay where you are, but something's going to happen.
And I'm like, no, I'm going to get one.
Yeah, and then, I'll pull up to another bank, hook the human error that I actually, one of my videos, had the metre plus fish at the boat, lost my net on my recent trip before, so I didn't have it adequate now, this little goldfish net. But anyway, human error, broke the fish off at the boat, metre plus fish, took off, and I just called Kish and I'm like, man, I'm done, I'm over this. Go back to the ramp, and there was this bank getting pounded by waves, and it's something I always just look at, and I thought, oh yeah, it's pretty good, but I always usually just drive past, and how worse can it get? Second or third cast, pulled a 96, and then the front started proper hitting. I thought, I've called it a good day. I was around the corner from the ramp, pulled up, I'm like, man, I pulled out at the ramp. He was actually on the phone to me, and he goes, man, I'm on. And then
I'd pulled up into this. I looked on the maps, and I'm like, geez, this has got to be protected. So I've made the run across, and it's white capping, and I've gone into this bay, and it's quite calm. And I've gone a lot of laydowns, and I've just launched this cast to, like Andy said, think about your cast, bring it across these laydowns. And before I've casted it, I've answered Thomas' call, and I've got him on loudspeaker, and I've got him on the bow there while I'm fishing, and I've gone pop, bang, and I'm like, I'm just acting like I hadn't caught a fish because I'm trying to have a conversation with Thomas, and he's like, are you on? I'm like, I'm on, and I've net this fish by myself, and don't ask me how, but I ended up going a metre. But as Steve would know, a metre fish in there are extremely heavy fish. We got some photos that don't look like a normal fish. They're very heavy fish. So, and that was just as that nasty storm pushed in. So
All
I
I'll
got
say
off
to
the
that
water
is,
straight away.
if you weren't Facebook Live, it didn't happen.
Thank you for listening to The Outflow by Ebb Tide Tackle. Subscribe to the podcast to listen to other episodes and stay up to date with new releases. And don't forget to rate and review.